Hey everyone, and welcome to Carrie's Garage. And on this episode, we're going to take a look at my 1967 Citroen 2CV. A lot of videos that I've done recently on the introduction of my cars are vehicles that I can actually drive and enjoy. So I decided now I'm going to do a couple of videos on some of the restoration case cars that I have and kind of show you around, especially this one. It's a bit on the unique side. And here we have it. This is a Citroen 2CV AZAM Export. It was specifically built to be an export model car, and you could not get this particular model in France. There's some really interesting, unique features of this particular 2CV, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that. Go ahead and walk around the car a little bit. Like I said, this is a big project car. I actually had saved it from up in the mountains. It had been sitting for quite a long time, I think since 85 or 86 under a tree. And the owner was actually talking to a guy who was just going to take it to the scrapyard. And I got wind of it through a friend who knew that I liked these little interesting French cars. And I went up there and I bought it mostly to save it. And I really want to get it going so I can enjoy it. When I got it, I let it sit for a couple of years until I moved down to my house here with my property and I picked it up. And I checked the engine, checked the oil, put a battery in it, and it actually started up, oddly enough, and it actually runs pretty good. It is missing a couple of parts, but I'll be able to source those out. Thankfully, 2CV stuff isn't super hard to get. A couple of things are going to be a bit difficult, but it's not bad. So for this particular model, the AZAM Export, they only produced it from April of 67 until September of 67, some of the research I've done online. Another thing that this car had was these plastic wheel trim pieces right here. Oops. That's the only one the car had when I got it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to find a set of those or if I will ever run them, but it's kind of a neat thing that that's what it had originally. This was one of the first ones to introduce the new style dashboard, and it also has the AMI 6 style speedometer with miles per hour instead of kilometers. And on the shifter ball, yeah, that's the shifter. We'll go into that in a minute. It has a ring around it. These rectangular indicators on the front fenders are unique to the car. And something about the trim in the bumpers. Now they went to the newer style bumpers on this, but the trim is supposed to be like a gray, pink color or whatnot. Just some of the stuff I did reading online. Now, I know 2CVs have been covered a lot by a lot of different people on the internet and YouTube, and friends of mine are very familiar with them. But if you don't know too much about the 2CV, I'll just go into a little bit of detail on it with this car and some of the interesting things that it has. Oh, and also, somewhere I read online that these door handles are fairly unique as well, but I've never seen another set like that, so they very well could be. On the 2CV, you've got these really cool flip-up windows, and that's the only windows that open. And they pop into this little retainer, which this is not clocked correctly. This button should be up over here. When we get into the interior, I stripped the interior on this car. It was completely filled with mouse droppings and just garbage. So I started cleaning it and vacuuming it really thoroughly. The seat covers were destroyed, so I started stripping the seats. And I kept a little bit of it for some patterns. But, I mean, you can order entire seat kits for this car, which I'll probably end up doing. The shifter is kind of something really interesting on this car. It actually comes out right here, and this is how you shift it. So you go back for 1, 2, 3, 4. And then reverse is right there. This car has a really, really cool feature that I'll show you when we look under the hood to do with the clutch. The top of the 2CV, kind of like a sardine can. It rolls all the way back to the back window right here. The top is completely shredded on this car, as you probably would expect for something that sat for such a long time. So at some point I need to order a new top. I don't want to do a huge amount to this car right now. I've got too many other projects that I want to get done before I really start digging into this guy. I'm missing the handle right there for the trunk, or the boot lid. There's the trunk, spare tire fits down in there. Just got some extra bits in here. Another interesting thing to point out is on the earlier 2CVs up until 1958, the trunk lid was actually part of the cloth top. And what you would do when you close it is you would latch it into one of those right there, which, like I said, they stopped doing that at 58, but even all the later cars had the stampings for that, which I find really interesting. And also another feature of the export car, especially coming to this market, is it's got the seal beam headlights. Originally, in France or in Europe, those would be like a halogen or replaceable filament with a running light inside here, but these have these bigger, goofy-looking headlights, which I think is kind of cute on this car. And also, on a 2CV, these are adjustable. There's a handle under the dash that if you have a bigger load in the trunk or more people, you can actually turn the headlights down so they're not pointing up into the sky. Let's go ahead and open up the hood, take a look at the engine, see if I can do this with one hand. Maybe not, hold on. Okay, there we go. So sitting under here, we have a 602cc 2-cylinder flat twin. Air-cooled. Got the fan right there, got the generator. So you got one cylinder right there, and one cylinder right there. It's kind of like a Volkswagen engine, but cut in half. It is front-wheel drive. There's the transaxle. We have inboard drum brakes. There's the starter. There's actually the shifter that comes out of the transaxle and that linkage that goes underneath the dash. So what I was saying, what's really interesting with this car is it has what they call a city clutch or a centrifugal clutch. So you have your main flywheel right here, which connects to the engine, and then you have a secondary flywheel, see if it'll focus, right there. And this connects to the transmission. If you see, this actually spins freely. Inside this flywheel is a round area covered in like little brake shoes or friction material. So when the engine gets to a certain RPM, those actually fling out and grab onto the internal flywheel on the transmission. So on this car, when you're driving it, if you press on the brakes and don't touch the clutch, it will not stall. So you press the brakes, come to a stop, put it in first gear, hit the gas and go. The only time you really need to use the clutch is when you're shifting between gears. I will go ahead and start it up here in a minute, but I wanted to show you something else really interesting as well about the suspension on this car. Well, for one, it has a massive amount of suspension travel. But basically, the rear wheel is connected right there. There's a shock absorber. And there's a gigantic spring in there that connects right there to the front wheel. So essentially how that works, if the front wheel gets pressed up, it kind of preloads the rear wheel and lifts it up a little bit. So it gives it a really, really interesting characteristic of how it drives. I'll have to post a couple of pictures up of these cars taking really fast turns, basically, and the thing looks like it's going to flip over. They lean really, really far, but they never will. All right, I'll go ahead and start up the mighty little 2-cylinder. If my research that I was reading around kind of figure out, this one has about 18.5 horsepower on this guy. The wiring on this car is all messed up, so I've got it kind of temporary rigged to have a wire running from the power lead to the coil. Let's see if it starts up. Should. Oh yeah, the other cool thing is it has a mechanical starter solenoid, basically, or Bendix, so yeah, there we go. I did have the choke on, so I was idling a bit higher. I need to go through the whole carburetor. It hasn't been touched since I got the car, so I guarantee you it's a bit gummed up. But it's enough to be able to actually start and run at a slightly higher revs. So overall, my plans for this car is I need to get tires for it. As you can see, the back tires are just completely blown out. Get some new tires on it, rebuild the whole brake system, clean up the engine a bit. I know there's probably some junk in there, and the plastic cooling fan does need to be replaced. Do some work on the interior, get a top, and I'm just going to drive it the way it is. It's going to be a really fun, enjoyable car. Probably at some point down the road, I'll do a much more thorough restoration on it, where I painted and fixed some other stuff on it, because I do believe this car deserves to be brought back to a better point in its life where it looks really nice, and kind of preserve it, because it is an interesting car. But I really want to drive it. I love driving these cars, and down where I live, I think it would be such a neat car to be able to just cruise around on. Oh, something else kind of odd. There's a funny story behind that bullet hole. The lady that I bought this car from, I guess, had a friend. I don't really remember the story 100%, but I guess he was a little neurotic or whatnot, and he decided the car looked too nice, so he pulled out his gun and just shot the door. That's what I remember her telling me. Really should call her up and get that story straight and write it down so I can remember. Well, I need to put it back in its little parking spot, so I'll see if I can move it. Brakes don't work, but the back tires being so bad it just stops itself. And we even took it for a little drive. Granted, it was about 10 feet, but that is pretty good. Well, that'll do it for the 2CV video. Like I say, it was going to be kind of a quicker one. Just wanted to show around a little bit on it and introduce you to it. Eventually, when I get around to doing this one, I'll do a full series on the Resurrection and doing all the work on it. But for now, I figure you guys would kind of like to see it. I know people love these little 2CVs. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.